Welcome to the Finer Games Club.
Welcome to the Finer Games Club, where high-class taste meets low-tier gameplay. My name is Martin, aka Vichy.
And I am Martijn, aka Foodie.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bam.
Bam.
Iced tea.
Water. Very, very standard. It could be
What
white
a wonderful
wine.
vintage.
Yeah. It stood in the barrel for a little bit too long.
Yeah, this one has lost some of its taste. Oh well.
All right.
It still serves as a prop. Yeah,
Yeah.
what are we talking about?
Yeah. Completely different topic this time. Whereas the last episode we really focused on one single game, or at least one single series, we're going to do something a little bit different this time. We're going to talk about a kind of genre. Even though probably at the end we will realize that maybe genre might not be exactly the right word for what we are going to talk about. We're going to talk about roguelikes. Why are we talking about roguelikes? First of all, because the genre roguelike or roguelite, we'll go into a little bit in a moment what the difference is between those two, and that the difference, at least for this talk, doesn't really matter too much. They've gotten really popular over the past few years, and they seem to be sprouting out of the ground like cabbage. There's a lot of people playing them. There's a lot of attention as well. A good point, of course, here to mention is that at the Game Awards last year, Balatro, a major roguelite last year, or roguelike, won Best Indie Game. So the attention is ever growing. And we thought, why not do an episode where we go into the genre, talk about some games in the genre, what is the reason that so many people, us included, of course, are attracted to them. And that's what we're going to do.
It's like if somebody has the label roguelike or roguelite printed over their Steam page, then I'm immediately interested. It's basically kind of what an open world used to be 10 years ago is now roguelike. We shall talk a little bit about the differences, get the definition and all the cerebral stuff out of the way, right? What is a roguelike? What is a roguelite? What is a roguelike in the first place? Well, first I want to say I think every roguelite is a roguelike, but not every roguelite is a roguelite. Did I get that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
That sounded like a little rap.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, first of all, we should talk about roguelikes. So the term stems from a game from like the 1980s, if I'm not correct. So was it like an ASCII based game, like text based game? Well, it had graphics, but the graphics were purely text based, right?
Yeah.
And it was kind of a dungeon crawler, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
With lots of randomized elements, like procedurally generated levels, loot, enemies, etc., enemy placement, and one very specific rule set that determined that when you die, your so-called run ends, and you have to start from the beginning. And that
it's meant to be that way also. You're meant to start over again and again and again.
No second, third life, no continue, no checkpoints, none of this. And of course, this is a very, very peculiar way of designing a game. Like if you just hear about it, if somebody were to pitch me this idea, I would probably think that sounds awful. So you're gonna tell me that every time I fail, I have to go back to the very start and do everything I just did again. But of course, game designers have found their ways around these restrictions and turned them into creativity, and actually made these types of game mechanics very motivational. So usually in roguelikes, the runs tend to be rather short, and the progression within the run, so not the meta progression from run to run, but the progression within the run tends to be very quick. Like a friend of mine said about Hades, it's almost like you're building up a Diablo 2 character, but instead of doing it in 30 hours, you do it in 30 minutes. So that's really cool. So when you have a very quick progression, it tends to go snap, 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 motivation, dopamine, dopamine, dopamine. And so it's not so bad that when you start over, you start from zero, but you actually tend to get where you were before really, really quickly. So I guess there's ways around this potential frustration barrier. But now we've already strayed from the definition of roguelike and roguelite. Yeah.
Yeah, what's the difference between a roguelike and a roguelite in this case?
Well, I think the most important difference between the two would be the meta progression or the lack thereof. Like you could almost consider a roguelike to be the more true and hardcore version of this rule set or of this game design philosophy, where you do have progression within the run, and as soon as you die or the run ends, your progression is set to zero and you start over. Whereas with a roguelike light, this is incredibly difficult. Whereas with a roguelite, you tend to have a meta progression, which means you get unlockables or or new characters, or you unlock new I don't know, buffs, advantages, perks, whatever you want to call it. Some character progression of sort that is true to all the runs, that is overarching. So let's say you unlock a double jump, and that double jump will serve you in any of the upcoming runs, for instance. Or there might be a currency of sorts that you earn within the run that you then get to spend before the upcoming run to make your run easier. So it's these types of things. And one of the most important differences also that roguelites tend to have a few less randomized elements. So there are potentially more fixed elements in terms of progression or game design. Like one of my favorite games is Returnal in this genre. And Returnal has set pieces. It's a very complex AAA type roguelite, and it has fixed rooms. You go from room to room, and the order of the rooms is randomized, but the actual and also the enemy placement within, but the actual design of the room, because it's so high quality, you couldn't quite procedurally generate that at the same quality level. That is predetermined. So that is a strong roguelite element.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like Risk of Rain, right? Risk of Rain is also considered a roguelite, and levels, there's randomness, of course, seeing as the drops that you get and the items, the upgrades that you get during a run, they are pretty much randomized. But the levels themselves are also fixed. They are not really procedurally generated. There are some changing elements about them, but it's not like a fully procedurally generated level, like for instance with Deep Rock Galactic Survivor, where you have a biome that you play in, but the level within that is completely randomized. You don't know what it's going to look like before. You just know what kind of elements are going to be in them based on the biome that you're playing, but you don't know the layout of the map. And of course, seeing as you in that game, mining is a mechanic, right? You can mine through pretty much all the walls that you find there. You can of course terraform the level to your heart's content, but it is essentially random. Yeah.
Yes, and it's also much easier to randomize that than a fully fledged 3D environment, especially one that has a lot of verticality like Returnal.
Mm-hmm.
So it would make sense in that case. And also, yeah, like you can, I guess as a game designer, you can have slightly tighter environments like in Returnal to kind of predetermine what the challenges and the encounters might be like. Whereas with something like Deep Rock, it doesn't really matter if the I don't know, the ore is over here or if it's over here. It's not really that much of a difference in terms of the experience of the user, but it's just enough to keep you on your toes, right?
Yeah.
I think even that small difference keeps you coming back.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you load it into the level and the ore that you need, the nitra which is a type of currency that you need to get to buy upgrades for your weapons. If it was always in the same place, then you would start playing the game on autopilot, right? And that's, I think, another thing with roguelikes that it's exactly what you say, that the type of randomness, that just little hint of surprise every time keeps you on your toes, and also makes sure that not every run ends up playing the same way. And you can't, like, in your head form an ideal run and just, yeah, like it's like putting a VHS tape. showing that, of course, that we're old by talking about VHS tapes, but you put a VHS tape into the recorder, you just hit play, right? You do the exact same things in the exact same order every time. But the randomness actually causes you to not be able to really do that.
I think that's actually fantastic that you point that out. That means there is no ideal way of playing it that you can pre-learn and then just regurgitate. So there is a real reason to come back and master the mechanics on a deeper level, and also that I think introduces an element of improvisation into the gameplay, which is something that I think we're both fond of. And I think there's a specific game you have recently become addicted to, such as Half the Gaming World, and I think you should introduce it.
Yeah. I guess we're, I think I dropped the name already before, Balatro. Yeah. Yeah, Balatro, for me, it's a really interesting story. So for the people watching that don't know it, yeah, how dare you? Where have you been living? No. Yeah, so for the people who really don't know it, it's basically a poker game mixed with roguelike mechanics. And if you're now confused, I was also confused the very first time that I heard about it, because I was like, how do those two things actually fit together? That didn't sound very natural to me at all. But then I started watching some videos, and quite quickly I was like, yeah, well, I actually like poker, so why shouldn't I try this? And I downloaded it, and I was hooked. Instantly hooked. It's just a combination of a lot of factors. It's the simple pixelated graphics, a really cool hypnotic soundtrack that's getting covered everywhere now also. And the game,
This one, that calling it a soundtrack is generous.
yeah, it's just three or four
one
tracks.
tune.
Yeah, it's one theme with
4 tracks. Oh, I thought it was one theme.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's different tracks, but they kind of all fade into each other. They are all the exact same tempo. So when you're playing a normal game and you enter the shop or something like that, it just naturally fades over in that theme, which is just a variation of the normal theme.
Okay, I only played it on the phone with the sound off.
So
yeah,
then
that's why.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just really cool, and there is this kind of special dopamine release about starting to play that game, and the essence is that there's an amount of score that you need to get, an amount of chips, and you play poker hands, and at the same time you use jokers, which are not acting like regular jokers in the card game, that they are a stand-in for every other card, but they are basically perks that you apply to your game and that make your card combination stronger or do different things. And that goes from very simply just multiplying your score by a certain amount or a certain multiplier, to every time that you play the first hand that you play in a round, if it's only one card, it will copy that card into your deck, so to say. So there's all kinds of crazy things that you can do. And yeah, the whole game is just it's an incredible demonstration of how you can create a roguelite where the runs are never the same, because you cannot 100% control what you're going to get when you start, because you cannot pick your jokers. You get them from packs, you get them from certain shops that are in between the rounds. And you basically have to go with what you get, right? And I think that's a really important point about a good roguelite for me, and that is that it's connected to the point that we made earlier, that a roguelite stops being fun if you just find one optimal way to play it, and you're allowed to play that way every single time. Yeah.
It's the same in Slay the Spire, kind of, where you have to have at least 2 or 3 strategies under your belt. You need to be good at least 3 builds to consistently get a win, because otherwise you are completely dependent on finding, I don't know, the Carnage card, or it's been a while that I played, but to find that specific card and then combine it with that other specific card.
Yeah.
And and because it's randomized, that is not predetermined that that's going to happen. So you damn well better have an alternative ready to go.
Yeah.
Which I think
Can't
is
put
really
all
cool.
your
So it
eggs
keeps you
in
on your toes.
one basket, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And with Balatro, I think the element of randomness is very interesting because I think it's purely input randomness based and not output randomness. So that means what cards you're gonna unlock or what jokers you're gonna get in the shop. That type of thing is random. But what those jokers do and how much your cards count for, that is not random. That is predetermined. You can that is a reliable result every single time.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of what I don't want to move away from this too quickly. But one of my favorite roguelikes is Into the Breach, and it's basically a puzzle generator, and there is an element of randomness to it in a sense that you get different maps. The maps are predetermined. You do get different enemies and different enemy placement though, and the enemy. So it looks like a strategy game where you have 3 units and then a bunch of enemies that you need to kill. And the enemy's placement, amount, type, and their action, whether they move or attack, is random. But before the turn of the enemy plays out, it shows you what they're about to do. So you can take action and completely take the enemy's action into consideration. So let's say there is like this alien that charges at a human building. You can get your unit. You can move your unit there, and stop the attack, and have the alien run into you instead. Mm-hmm. Or you can go next to the enemy, and push the enemy into the water. But you might also accidentally push it against another human building or one of your units. And all of this is communicated to you before it happens. So you can kind of you can really strategize and optimize what is going to happen. So there's no output randomness whatsoever. But you're going to have to deal with a new situation. You're going to be thrown into a new situation on every turn. So it's kind of like a puzzle generator. And oftentimes there are knock-on effects from turn to turn that you wouldn't know. Oh, now because I've tried to block this attack, I'm now at the other end of the map and I cannot reach the aliens that are coming from like the bottom of the map, etc. So I think that's a really cool way of doing this. Like there is randomness to it, but it's not just an entire random mess.
It's not unfair randomness, and I think that is probably a really important point to make people not get too discouraged when playing a roguelite, because if there's randomness and the randomness just makes you feel like there is no way to react to it, or it's just washing over you, and it can cause a feeling of unfairness.
Yes,
which I would assume a lot of people won't like. Yeah.
Not everyone will be the exact same difficulty, and that's kind of that. I like the meta progression of the roguelites in general. Mm-hmm. I'm not a huge fan of pure roguelikes. Mm-hmm. I like roguelites because, excuse me, they tend to start out really difficult, and then become a little bit easier as you unlock the meta progression. And they just become easy enough to where then you can suddenly beat them. And somebody who's extremely adept can probably beat them without most of the unlocks.
Yeah. Of course, there's runs, I guess challenge runs that some people do, maybe even speed runs where they have nothing unlocked, and they beat the game that way. But I also feel like when there is some kind of meta progression, right, then there is some other thing to play for as well. Not just for the knowledge, right? Because the whole thing with roguelikes, with pure roguelikes, is that the only progression is here. Is that it's in your head. It's knowledge that you are attaining, hopefully, right? And that you take from run to run. Because when you make a mistake in one run, like you used a certain skill at a certain point that you shouldn't have at that point, and you throw the run because of that, then the takeaway is that, well, I should probably not be doing that the next run. Yes. But I think that if that's the only progression there is, then there's potential for a lot of discouragement if there are runs where you feel you're not actually getting closer to cracking the code.
It could literally be that, yeah. Oh yeah, that enemy after 2 hours stomped me for the 15th time. Well, great.
Yeah.
Let's start over. That can be very frustrating. Although it is interesting because I do not tend to like pure roguelikes. I'll get it one day. But one of my favorite games of all time is Sekiro, and that is a Souls-like RPG. But with, even though that's debatable, it's not really an RPG. It's actually an action game. It's not an RPG because it has no character progression. It has some character progression, but it's very minor. And the only thing that does get better is you, the player. And I do love that in this checkpoint Souls-like context. If I had to start over every time with Sekiro and it had all these randomized elements, I would dislike it. But in this format, this whole idea of it's only you, the player, that gets better and not the character in the game, I find that actually very appealing, just not in this context.
Yeah, there's just a little bit. I don't know. There is just this thing of when I'm playing a game, when I'm investing time into doing that, I want to probably want to walk away with the feeling that I kind of like attained something, did something, achieved something. And if a game requires, I don't know, 10 or 15 hours of time invest before I even get the semblance or the feeling, the start of the feeling that I'm getting better or something like that, that's a little harsh for me personally.
Yeah, that's for like 17-year-olds to figure out. Not for us. Yeah,
we're a little past that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've beaten all the FromSoft games. You know, I've proven myself as a gamer. I don't need to do it over and over again. Like I feel like this is a very interesting thing. Ever since we live in a post Souls world, and it is like the idea that a niche game, which most of these roguelikes are, should be very difficult, is something that seeped over from like the Souls culture, I feel like. So a lot of these modern roguelikes tend to be extremely, extremely difficult, and I find that very annoying at times. I don't need the game to be that difficult. I need to be just difficult enough. Like I will only invest myself into a very difficult game if the quality is exceptional. Like Returnal is such a case. Mm-hmm. Returnal is the highest production value roguelike ever made. And it's fantastic. Like the atmosphere. I usually do not like audio logs too much, but the audio logs in that one are just incredible. Atmosphere is incredible. Sound is incredible. The aesthetic, the art design is fantastic. I love how on PlayStation 5 it involves the DualSense controller. Yeah, that one kind of earned its difficulty. There are some lower tier games I feel like that are just difficult for the sake of being difficult. I'm not hugely into that.
Like a Kaizo Mario
That's for another
game
episode.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. Like could we say that we're in a sinus wave of game difficulty? Because I felt like in the 90s, games could be crushingly difficult. Like, for instance, certain Mario games or something from the 90s, they were crazy difficult if you compare them to the difficulty of most games today. And then I felt like after that, going into the 2000s and the 2010s, games generally started becoming more easy. Most of the games became a lot easier. And now maybe we're just like in the upturn again, where games are generally, or some games are generally becoming more difficult again.
Yeah.
We're ever looking for the balance, I guess, for how difficult a game should be.
Yeah, I think now we're kind of split. Yes, you're right. In the 90s, the games tended to be very, very difficult. I think there's a couple reasons for that. One is the arcade culture. Of course, you wanted people to spend as many coins in the arcades as possible, so you make the game very difficult, and that just informed non-arcade game culture as well. Another reason could be that you didn't have too much memory on like cartridges and floppy disks, so you couldn't pack an indefinite amount of levels or code on it. So if you wanted to get 10 hours out of a game instead of 1 hour, you better make it really freaking difficult. I guess that's one of those reasons. And the other thing was, we didn't have as many games back then. You didn't have a catalog of 400 freaking games at your disposal at all times. So you had to make the most out of the one game. So there had to be either a high level of replayability or difficulty to stretch it out.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that now we've touched, or we are touching upon, we've seen the birth of a genre that is literally based around replayability, right? Where replayability is the whole core of the genre.
Yes, let's. We gotta really have a discussion about difficulty on its own. That's a good episode to have.
Yeah,
I feel like now we're in the extremes. Like, games have gotten more difficult than ever and also easier than ever at the same time.
Just not the same games.
I think that's,
but yeah.
Yeah, not the same games, but like different streams of thought, different schools of thought.
Yeah.
Anyway, shall we touch on a game that had its no, it's still thriving, but it was thriving like 2-3 years ago when it came out, and it like changed the world. It changed gaming, the future of gaming. It shaped.
I think I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're talking about Vampire Survivors.
Yeah.
It is a game made by, I think, a single person that single-handedly invented a genre. It's a roguelike, but we've already kind of established that roguelike may not be an actual genre. It's more like a rule set. It's a type of, or it's a mechanic that you can put over a game. Like, you can literally have an RTS roguelike. You can have a city builder roguelike. You can have an FPS. Did I say FPS? RPG, FPS, whatever you want. Vampire Survivors kind of created its own genres. The Survivors, auto-battler type genre. It's kind of like Diablo without the clicking.
Yeah, it's like a fascinating quest to a game that has extremely minimized controls, but is still super fun to play. It's kind of fascinating
and quite deep.
Really.
Quite deep as well.
It is a surprisingly deep game, even though it doesn't look like one. And yeah, it's what I think is really nice about Vampire Survivors, and also a lot of games that got inspired by it, and some other roguelites as well, let's be honest, is that it's a very good pick up and play game, right? A run literally takes 30 minutes, a single run in that game, if you manage to make it until the end, of course. So whenever you don't have a lot of time, or you're just, I don't know, doing your daily commute in the metro or something like that, you just put that on your phone and you can kill 30 minutes with it, and it's a load of fun, right? It's very controllable.
You don't also need to like immerse yourself in a deep story or anything. Like, it doesn't require too much attention. It's just enough attention to keep you in a flow type state. And this whole idea of pick up and play, and after 30 minutes we end it, no strings attached. That's always what I found fascinating about sports games, both racing and sports. Like, I like to play a round of FIFA here and there. I think it's great. I've been a FIFA guy since the mid 90s. And if I only have 20 minutes to play, quick round of FIFA, that's cool. There's a start, a middle, and an end, and then we're done. And we
Do you also have this feeling that this happens to me more and more nowadays, that I've been playing a story-based game, or a game that has pretty intricate controls, and at some point you're familiar with them, then you put the game away for 2 or 3 weeks, and after that you start playing it again, and you're like,
riding a bike.
How does this work?
Oh, okay, the other way around.
Yeah, for me it's really the other way around. Like, I
know
forget the controls, and I
gotcha.
don't know what to do anymore. I lost the plot, literally. I don't know where we are in the story anymore, and I need to like.
This had happened to me.
Yeah.
All the time with RPGs in general. Happens to me all the time. I have played Baldur's Gate 3 for about 25 hours, and then I had a tour coming up. I stopped playing. When I came back, I was like, I have no clue what. Like, I still remembered the characters. I still remembered the plot because they're so well written. But I didn't know what I was kind of going for in terms of builds and progression. Like, I had this whole idea laid out. I'm going to plan these characters in this way. This character is going to become this. This character is going to become this. This character is going to supplement all this. And I've completely lost what I was going for. And I remember I had to do so much reading at the beginning of the game to kind of get into the whole rule set and figure out what I was going to do. It just was impossible for me to get back into it. Yes, so I absolutely know what you're saying. And this has happened to me with literally dozens of games.
Yeah, it happens to me also quite a bit. I have a lot of broad interests in terms of gaming. So there's a lot of different games that I usually play at the same time. But I know that in the background of my mind, it's probably not a good idea because it makes the chance higher that I kind of lose my footing in a certain game that I'm playing. And at some points, I started back up and I'm like, I don't know where to start anymore. I have no idea where I am. I don't know what I'm doing. And then there's this very high mental boundary to invest into continuing it again. And Baldur's Gate is a funny thing. It's a funny thing that you mentioned that one because I still haven't finished it. I'm still about halfway in chapter 3. I was really far actually. And yeah, I still haven't gotten to the point where like, okay, let's download it again and let's start again because I know what's going to happen.
That's the problem with being middle-aged and being into like 100-hour RPGs. It's impossible.
Yeah, it's very hard to combine. And that's again where roguelikes are very nice because it's a game that you can't play for a long period of time. It won't take you long to get back into it. It won't take you a lot of time per se, right? It's just a game that you can, as we said before, just play in between for 30 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe even 15 minutes. And it's still going to give you something. It's still going to be fun.
And of course, Vampire Survivors in particular is so great because it just tricks your brain, it hacks your brain and gives you dopamine hit after dopamine hit. Yeah. Like the progression is so quick, you unlock a new level literally every 30 seconds and sometimes 5 times in 10 seconds, and you get to make these quick but rewarding decisions about what your next perk or your next weapon or your next upgrade is going to be, and it just keeps coming and keeps coming, and then the screen fills up and everything gets so frantic and bizarre and over the top, and it's just so cool to see how it goes from at the beginning the game looks really lame, like nothing is happening on screen, and at the end of the game it's just complete dopamine overload. Yeah, I freaking love that game. It's such a good time.
Yeah.
We the two of us, we have a secret favorite genre.
Yes,
and we're
secret,
both
but I guess the secret has to come out now.
We're going to confess we're getting out of the closet. We both adore immersive sims. Is that right?
Yeah. I think immersive sims are, we've talked about it, but not on the podcast yet. And I say yet with a lot of emphasis. We've talked about immersive sims, just the two of us, privately a lot. And some of our favorite games, many of our favorite games are immersive sims or games that have immersive sim elements. And very funnily enough, there is actually one roguelite that we've actually co-opted also quite a bit, that I wouldn't say is a full immersive sim, but it has very strong immersive sim elements. Maybe you can give us an idea which one that is.
Yes, so I would say this game is, especially playing it with you, it's possibly been my best co-op experience I've ever had. I don't know if you agree, but for me it was like it's the pinnacle of co-op playing, pretty much. And also, I feel like immersive sims are the pinnacle of game design. Like the concept of it, there's something very classy, something very royal about it. So you combine that with roguelike elements and co-op, and you get Streets of Rogue. And that is one of my favorite games of the past couple of years. I absolutely adore it. It's a top-down fighting game. And the idea is that you're basically you wake up in a slum and you're part of a resistance group, and you have to make your way up to like a corporate building or a corporate tower. I don't remember the backstory too well, and you have to become mayor of the city by fighting your way through all different layers of the city. And the city, of course, is a total metropolitan mess.
Yeah,
like
it's total dystopia.
Total dystopia. Everybody for themselves. Everybody's messed up. It's pure anarchy. Even though there is actually a police state, so it's an authoritarian regime, but people just do whatever the hell they want whenever they want it. Like it's the rule of the jungle, basically. And you have to fight your way up to become the mayor of the city. And it starts off fairly simple. You start with like a soldier class, somebody who can handle guns, and you walk around the city, do different objectives, earn some money, upgrade your character. There's a character progression system, of course. But as you go through the game, you unlock different characters, and these different characters all have very different traits. And this I think where the game becomes unique.
Yeah. So you have that soldier type as you were talking about. But for instance, there are some really crazy ones. For instance, you might have a gorilla. Who
I love the gorilla.
Yeah, the gorilla is super fun to play.
Yeah.
So the gorilla is very good at using melee weapons. I think the gorilla cannot even use guns. So there are classes that are completely banned from doing certain things. But he's of course really strong, so he does a lot of melee damage, and the special attack that the gorilla has is like a charged up punch that you can use to literally punch people through walls.
Yes.
But there's other very unique things as well, is that you can get in contact with other people in the city and talk to them and do missions for them. But with the gorilla, that's a little difficult because the gorilla does not speak English. He cannot speak. So he can only communicate with other gorillas who are usually being held by scientists in cages.
Scientists.
Yeah, so you can free them, and then they will actually help you because they're the same type. And the same happens if you're a policeman.
There's a social system. There's a social system. So if you're a gorilla, obviously you can communicate with other gorillas, and they'll be immediately friendly towards you. But if they are like hunter type or scientists, if a scientist encounters you, they'll try to catch you.
Yeah,
because they want to use you for their experiments. It's the same deal if you're let's say, if you're the soldier, you can enter barracks and converse with the other soldiers and ask them to help you. Or if you're, like, say, there's so many examples. Like I can't even think of any right now, but there's so many like places that you're allowed to enter. Mm-hmm. If you're a certain
police
character
station
and you're not allowed to enter.
Instance.
Yeah, if you're a policeman, you're allowed to enter the police station. If you're a prisoner and you enter the police station, you're causing hell on earth.
Yeah, totally different reaction, right? Yeah.
Yes. So there's actual reactivity to the character you choose and to the actions within your game.
Yeah. I really love the zombie. You remember the zombie?
If you're a mere... but the zombie was... you could bite other... You could bite NPCs and they would turn into zombies, and you could build your zombie army.
Hostile to you. Always.
True.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was also that's also a completely different thing. So when you're playing the zombie, then the only way that you can really win is just infecting everybody. And in co-op, it can be really interesting because if the co-op player is playing, for instance, a more normal character, so to say, it's actually really bad combination because once the zombie starts infecting everybody, the co-op player will get attacked by them. So either you have to play something else that that's not attractive to the zombies, a non-fleshy player.
Yeah, you could be a robot, I think.
Yeah,
right?
a robot is fine
instance,
because the robots don't get attacked by the zombies.
Yes.
Yeah. But there's all this systemic
so many
design.
cool interactivities. Yeah, so many cool random interactivities that cause outcomes that you couldn't predict. So that's Streets of Rogue. Thoroughly recommended. There's a new one coming out sometime in the future. I can't wait to play that for real. Yep. now turned into an open world game, an open world survival craft game, it seems, but still with
Hopefully
the
not.
same interactive ImSim elements, which just goes to tell you that roguelike is not really a genre. It's a rule set. It's an idiosyncrasy of game design.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
calling it a genre is really doing it kind of a disservice because there is so much novelty in roguelikes, right? Not just in the roguelike elements, but to the kind of games that they get applied to. Like
Yes.
strategy roguelikes, for instance, that Into the Breach is kind of a little bit more strategy-like, I guess. It's too diverse to really be called a genre in that way. Another
Yeah.
cool example that I can kind of come up here would be Hades. Of course, an extremely major title as well. Very much a roguelike as well. And the main thing that I think sets Hades apart is that Hades is very story focused, which is extremely unusual for a roguelike. And it's also cool
Yes.
that the progression of the story progression of Hades is connected to you winning runs. Because the very first time that you win a run in Hades, then you get a whole bit of story that you see for the first time then. And then it becomes clear that you'll have to win more runs in order to really progress the story and to get to the end of the story.
Okay, without spoiling it, I think death is a huge part of the storytelling style in that game, right? Every time you die, you get a bit of lore, a bit of exposition.
Yeah, that too.
So right, we meet new characters. Yeah, but what would happen if you like? I have played Hades. I haven't gotten really into it. The gameplay is not for me. It's the game for me is too hard to read. It's just too much going on.
Yeah.
On the screen, which is funny because that's something I really like about Vampire Survivors. But for a game like Hades that requires more precision, I like the game to be easier to read. It's just, and it's also not, the gameplay is not impactful enough for me. I didn't gel with the weapons. I didn't gel with the movement quite that much. But with that said, what would happen if you won the first run ever? Would that break the story or?
No, I don't think so. But I think that the chance that you do is pretty much zero, I would say, unless you, of course, started a fresh file as a player that already played before. I think actually it's kind of a little bit Souls-like if you think about that. Because within each run there are certain bosses that you'll have to kill, and those bosses are essentially always the same, and they happen at the same points also in your run. And all of the bosses have very specific move sets. So once you learn their move sets, they're not that hard to beat. And what I remember about my really first week of experience with Hades is that the very first boss, I don't remember her name, some lady, that I had to beat. The very 5 first times that I fought her, I was absolutely chanceless. There was no way for me that I was going to beat her because I always got hit by all of her abilities. And then I think finally on the 6th time, I found out that there were certain things that she did in a certain order, and she telegraphed certain moves by, for instance, doing a certain movement or raising her hand or something like that. So all of a sudden I had figured out that there was logic to what she was doing, and then at that moment I never lost anymore. I won every single time, and I guess that's a bit Souls kind of thing, right?
Yes, that's something that I love about Sekiro so much. We're gonna gush about Souls-likes pretty soon, but spoiler alert. But that is something that I value about those types of games, especially Sekiro, where you cannot in Souls you can grind and farm and basically overpower a powerful enemy even with bad gameplay. This is something that happened to me, especially in Elden Ring, why it's a little lower tier for me than maybe Dark Souls 1 and 3. But in Sekiro, there is no way to win while playing poorly because there is no levels. So what happens is, like Genichiro, anybody watching this, Genichiro at first will beat the ever-living crap out of you. And he'll do so for 20 to 30 times. And then maybe one day you'll get him after the 30th try or so, you'll get him. But then there's a boss rush type mode, or you can replay the game. I've replayed the game a couple times. When I was on tour, I actually replayed it over and over. On my last tour, I beat it like 3 times. And I got so good at fighting Genichiro that I became the boss. Like, Genichiro's fearing me. It was literally like Matrix when Neo just does
stops
this,
the bullets.
and the bullets stop flying. It's just like, I know what I need to do at all times, and he literally cannot touch me. He turned from he steamrolling over me to not being able to touch me. So that's I love when that happens in games.
Yeah, it's a really...
That is something very roguelike, traditional roguelike, but
Yeah.
once again, not huge if that is combined with random elements and permadeath, you know?
Yeah, when you're feeling like... because there is this type of determination that you need just to get to that point, right? And the kind of amount of repeats that you are expected to go through before you finally get through. I think but yeah, that's going to be a topic for another one. I think my tolerance to doing things over and over again until it works, I think, kind of is lower than yours.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a professional guitar player, so my tolerance for that kind of nonsense is really, really high.
Same lick over and over again 1,000 times, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah, Hades. So what would you say is the unique selling point of Hades? We had Vampire Survivors with its super quick progression and constant dopamine. We have Streets of Rogue with immersive elements and strong interactivity of various game elements. What's the Returnal was the AAA super high production roguelite. What is Hades' claim to fame?
Story and art design. That's I think the two things. The art design is absolutely wonderful in Hades. It's a completely it looks. I'm not sure if it's actually hand drawn, but it kind of looks like it's hand drawn. And the game just has style. That's how I would describe it. Beautifully created characters, also good voice acting. That's not a given, of course, in this genre at all. But the fact that there is a roguelike that is really focused on story and that has fantastic acting in it is it's commendable, I would say.
And the thing I love about it is that
there was one more thing actually, because
oh, sorry, we got disconnected here for a second. I'll just make a cut here.
Okay.
The thing I love about Hades, even having played it very little, is that it makes the roguelite elements a part of the story and the narrative. Right? It's baked into the character is aware of the fact that he's dying over and over again and then trying over and over again.
Yeah, and the dying itself is part of the story, right? Because he's immortal, right? So it's not like it's not an unnatural part of the story. The repeat of or the continuous repeating of what he's doing is actually explained by the story, which is really cool, because I think in most
it's the same in Returnal.
Yeah,
it's the same in Returnal. Like whenever you die, you suddenly wake up like Groundhog Day from the exact same moment over and over, and the character is aware of it. So yeah, it's that is super cool. Let's go through some others here. We're already 50 minutes in. Let's go through some other, maybe like some hidden gems a little bit more quickly. I have one on my list that became very successful in around 2018. It's called Dead Cells. It's a platformer with randomized loot. Let me think. Are the levels randomized? I haven't played it in a while, but certainly the biomes aren't. There's a couple of biomes, and the levels do, even if they're procedurally generated, they feel kind of samey. But what really drives it home is the fact that you find all kinds of different loot, different weapons, and you have tons of different builds you can do. It's very combat focused, and the combat is really high quality. Like there's parrying, blocking, there's melee, there's magic types, there's throwables, there's all kinds of stuff, and the challenge level is also really, really high. So yeah, Dead Cells, if you're into a combat-focused 2D platformer, that's one to check out. It actually, interestingly enough, has released an update not too long ago that lowers the difficulty and that can turn off permadeath and introduce a checkpoint system instead. But I think you would rip out the heart and soul of that game if you activated that.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, right? There's a lot of games where you can deactivate certain measures of difficulty, but it still feels like when you do that the game wasn't really designed to be ran in that way. I guess it could be the same
Yes.
for Into the yeah,
Dead Cells.
Dead Cells. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Really
one I
good
didn't
visceral
play.
combat. Great game. Great visceral combat. Strongly recommended. Slay the Spire. I think we played both.
Yes, yeah, I like it as
I've
well,
made it
but
to
I'm not,
the
not very
19th
good at
level. I've made it to the 19th level. Not the 20th is the final level. I've not made it past 19.
it. Yeah, I'm
So,
not very good at it.
yeah, it's one of my favorite games of the past 10 years, for sure. I absolutely love it. I love Dead Link, an FPS that nobody ever played. It's kind of like Doom Eternal, where you enter different arenas and you have a bunch of special skills. You do have randomized guns, so you can apply perks and status effects to them, and you kind of have to go with the flow and improvise and optimize your build as you go. But it's kind of like Doom Eternal in a sense that you have all these special abilities and you need to use them all the time to stay alive. You need to use any advantage in every part of the core mechanic that is available to you at all times to survive. If you play the game like a regular FPS, you will fail.
Yeah, it's also one that I've never tried. Maybe I
Nobody
should.
has played it.
Yeah,
It's
should try it.
shocking to me. The gameplay is ridiculously good. Nobody has ever played it. I don't know why there's no buzz around it. Here's me plugging it. Deadlink. Try it.
I'm
It's
gonna try it.
Freaking fantastic. Yeah, I love it.
There's one more example that I think is also pretty interesting because it has some semblance of novelty as well, which is called Dungeon Crawler. So it's not called
Never heard of it.
Crawler, it's Clawler. And
okay.
well, both you and me, we have Steam Decks, and well, let the Steam Deck be an extremely cool device on which a lot of roguelikes can be very nicely played, of course, because just like the
Absolutely.
game, it's just a device that you pick up for 30 minutes to an hour, sit on the couch or whatever, and just play a little bit.
I think you've just cracked why that is my roguelike machine.
Yeah.
You just cracked it. Absolutely, that's incredible.
Fits the
Wow.
format of the
Mind
game,
blown. Mind blown. Yeah. If you have more time, you're gonna sit down on the couch and turn on the PS5 or go to your PC. But if you have little time, yeah, you pick up the Steam Deck. That makes total sense.
Fits together, yeah. Yeah, so with Dungeon Crawler, just to give a short explanation of what it is, it's basically a roguelike with a like a claw machine from 7-Eleven or from the fair or something like that. And you basically have a certain, it's like a deck builder as well. So you have certain items that are in your machine, and then you have to use a claw to grab them out. And depending on which items you grabbed in that grab and in which order you grabbed them, something happens and the enemies get attacked. So it's kind of, if you powered Slay the Spire with a claw machine, then you would get Dungeon Crawler, basically. And it's pretty cool because you have all kinds of different mechanics, like you can fill your claw machine with water, and then it gets easier or harder to grab certain items because certain items float,
Okay.
others don't. You can put lava in your claw machine, which changes how the damage items work that are in your machine. You have all kinds of different characters that play in different ways, and you have certain challenges that you can also do. So I recommend it.
Okay,
pretty
cool. There's one roguelike I've had my eyes on for a while. I haven't actually pulled the trigger and bought it, but there's this game called Witchfire, which looks like a really high production FPS with roguelike elements. That's one. It's kind of like, it looks like a modern Hexen or Heretic.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've sent you a link, right? That
Yeah.
one looks really good. That's one I'm eager to kind of check out. Are there any games that you would say that should not be that are roguelikes but shouldn't be?
Oh yeah, yeah. Not that many, but there are definitely some examples of that. So one recent example that I can come up with here. I love the Orcs Must Die series. For somebody who's never heard of it, it's basically kind of tower defense, but it's not really focused around towers. So you have a map, and in that map there is a certain amount of doors and lanes, and there's a portal at the center of the map. And when those doors open, orcs come out and they start walking slowly towards the portal. And that portal has a number, like for instance 40. That means that if 40 orcs manage to make it through the portal, then you lose. So your objective basically is to stop the orcs from getting there. And you do that by placing barricades to change their routes, and to place traps to actually kill them. So spike traps in the floor, lava that they walk through, things that are dropping down from the ceilings, lasers, saw blades that are shooting out from the walls, all kinds of things. So you're basically asked to pull from your creativity as to how best to kind of funnel them through the traps so that they move there slowly, and then
very tower defense. So.
It's very tower defense, but it's just mostly trap related, not really towers that shoot. There are some of traps that are like that, but not too many. But to get back to what it has to do with roguelike, so Orcs Must Die 3 I played, I think, last year, and I really liked it. It was really cool. This year, it was the end of last year, I think. Orcs Must Die Death Trap came out, which is the last iteration of that series. And I don't know why, but they decided to make it a roguelike. And I feel that they probably did that because it's popular, right? And they were like, okay, why don't...
You could just see these people in the meeting, right? You can see them in front of your eyes. Yeah.
The guy who suggested that they should just stick to what they're good at, that's the guy that was thrown out of the window, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the meme format, yeah. So why I feel this game doesn't really work as a roguelike is because in Orcs Must Die 3 you have this really logical progression. You start off with a very simple map that has only one lane and one door, and you only have maybe 2 or 3 traps to work with. So you get this experience of really getting eased in to how the game works, how things should be placed, and then gradually things get more complex. Now with Death Trap, the maps are always the same size. So if you just start playing, you will already have the most complex map that you can ever think of. And it seems to be more focused around that you're actually killing with your character, because your character is actually an active part of the game as well. You can run around, there's a guy with a bow, there's a guy with a hammer, I don't know what, but there seems to be much more focus in Death Trap on the character skills than on the traps. And it seems like you are barely able to cover the entire map just on your own. It seems to be geared towards playing with 2, 3, or even 4 people, which is the maximum. Of course, that has nothing to do with it being a roguelike, but there is some other part of it that does suffer very much from it being a roguelike, and that's really the progression, because the idea of progression in this game is that you have a meta progression that's fueled by skulls, which is it's a currency that you earn by winning a run. So when you win a run, you have to make a choice. Either you continue, and in that case, you wager half of the skulls that you've earned to go into another map to try to win more. If you lose that map, then you lose the skulls that you put on the line. So if you stop there, then you bank all of the skulls and you can put them all into your meta progression. And what I don't like about this is that it feels like the game is trying to push you to make an impossible choice. When you stop, you feel like you should have continued. And when you continue, you feel like you should have stopped. And the last thing that I hate about it is that most roguelikes have some other type of goal rather than fueling the meta progression, right? The meta progression is there to bring you to the goal
closer
of winning.
to the ultimate goal, yeah.
And in Orcs Must Die, Death Trap, it's the other way around, right? you play to get to the meta progression, right? To advance your meta
Yeah.
progression. So
And why would I meta progress if there's nothing to progress towards?
yeah, it's kind of recursive, right? I'm
Like I haven't played it, so I'm just
I
going
cannot
off with what
recommend
you're
it. If you want to
telling
play
me,
Orcs Must Die, then play Orcs Must Die 3 because that's a really really fun game. But I can't recommend Death Trap. No. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's I feel like Yahtzee Croshaw from Second Wind said you can turn every game into like an open world, and you can turn every game into a roguelike. And I feel like there's for me there's many games that I play purely based on the fact that they're roguelikes. I don't think I would play Vampire Survivors if it weren't a roguelike.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
I don't think I would touch Balatro if it weren't a roguelike. So the roguelikeness is what makes it attractive to me. But there also are examples for like Everspace 1, cool game, was a roguelike, was not that interesting. Also had a lack of content, I feel like. Everspace 2 turned into a looter shooter, Diablo 2 in space, essentially. And that was freaking divine, that game. It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, loved it as well.
So yeah, roguelikes. I think. Are we gonna wrap this one up? What do you think? You have anything?
I think we can
anything
wrap
else
this
to
one
add?
up. Yeah, it was a fun talk. Yeah, it's a really
Yeah.
really cool topic. Yeah, and
It made me realize how many freaking roguelikes I've played. Man, this is just some of them. It's insane. I love the genre.
It's also
Oh, it's not
because
a genre, is it?
they're so bite-sized, right? Like
Yes.
I feel whenever I want to pick up a new roguelike, there's always enough mental capacity left to pick up a new one. And with RPGs,
Yeah.
with big RPGs, there just isn't. Currently, I'm playing through Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is fantastic.
I wouldn't even know where to put that in my day. It's like
But
so overwhelming. Yeah.
But I can't put Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 next to Final Fantasy 16 or something like that. My brains would explode probably.
Yeah, it's very cool. Actually, I'm the same. Like whenever I have time, I usually have one massive game that I'm quote unquote working on. Then I have one that I throw in between.
Yeah.
I'm kind of I'm preparing for our immersive sim episode. I'm replaying Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines at the minute. So that's the big game that I'm playing. And then I'm supplementing with the occasional round of Balatro or something like that, or something like that.
Probably we also need to before we record that episode to reserve some time for playing The One again.
Oh yes, I don't even think I need to play The One ever again. I know exactly what's up.
I can dream this game.
Yeah.
The voice lines.
It's like Gothic.
Yeah,
It's Gothic. I know exactly where to turn.
If it were to disappear from the world, it's still in here, and I mean I don't have the source
It's
code
like
in there. but-
Dark Side of the Moon. I never need to listen to Dark Side of the Moon or The Wall or those albums again. They're completely ingrained in my brain. Yeah.
Yeah, this game won't disappear. But I think once we get to that episode, we'll make it.
Comment down below if you think you know what game we're talking about.
Yeah, that will be an interesting. one.
Aren't you supposed to do that as a good YouTuber?
Yeah.
Call to action.
We should definitely say like, share, and subscribe, right? Because that will.
yeah.
Because people that have made it this far, they will definitely subscribe. What I saw in the statistics, by the way, is that only about 20% of the people that have watched so far are subscribed. So there is a lot of potential there.
Oh, sorry, you cut off there. I'm sure whatever you like, I couldn't hear that. I'm sure we'll have it in the final video, and I'm sure that whatever you said, it was very wise, indeed. So with that said, we'll see you guys soon. Thank
right.
you very much. Thank you for checking out the Finer Games Club, and thank you, Martijn, for hanging out with me.
All right. Thank you, Martin, and see you in the next episode.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you guys. Bye-bye.